Today, my brothers and sisters, we celebrate the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary, a holy day of obligation. And I know there seems to be always some confusion, even amongst us priests and deacons, as to whether it is obligatory or not. Mindful, especially if it's near a weekend. Well, I discovered recently that it is always obligatory. And there is one simple reason as to why that is the case. Because the United States of America is dedicated to God under the protection of Mary and under the title Immaculate Conception. We as a nation are dedicated to God under the protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary in her Immaculate Conception, the one who prays for us now and at the hour of our death. Today's great feast of the Church is really an expression of our Catholic belief that God kept Mary free from the stain of original sin from the first moment of her conception in the womb of her mother Eve. Now, some might argue, how can that be? How could Mary be born without sin? Well, if you had a choice and you wanted a perfect mother, wouldn't that be the case? Absolute perfect, right? I've always said my mom would be about 35. No gray hair. She would look absolutely fabulous, even in heels. So why wouldn't the Mother of God be perfect? In other words, God prepared Mary to be the mother of the Christ, the one who would wipe away our offenses. Mary, if you like, is the perfect image of the Church. Mary is what we should hope to be. The dogma or doctrine of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary was proclaimed by Pope Pius IX in 1854. But the belief that Mary had been preserved from original sin from the moment of her conception has been cherished by the faithful for centuries. The early church fathers loved to speak of Mary as the new Eve, the one whose yes undid Eve's no in the Garden of Paradise. Mary Immaculate helps us rediscover and defend who we are and what is inside us too, especially when we receive Christ in the Eucharist. And let's not forget Genesis 1:27, because we are made in the image and likeness of God. Mary Immaculate is purity in person, even though she too was surrounded by evil, pain, and indeed suffering. But she chose God's plan for her over any personal desires. Mary's purity shows us how we are meant to be, to rise above the seduction of evil attraction, therefore becoming a worthy dwelling place for the Son of God at any time. Interestingly, in the Garden of Paradise or the Garden of Eden, the serpent did nothing forceful. The serpent didn't force Eve or grab her by the hand and take her over to that tree and threatened her to eat that apple right now. No. Evil did that. And the same evil seduces us too into believing that an evil thing can be a good thing. When Eve ate the apple and then, in turn, we are told, gave it to Adam to eat, Genesis tells us that they felt naked and ashamed. Isn't that what happens to you and me when we sin too? We feel naked and ashamed. The nakedness of Adam and Eve was their shame, nothing to do with the lack of clothing. And of course, then the blame game starts. Eve begins to blame the serpent. Adam begins to blame Eve. And so on. They refuse to admit that it was by their own choice that they somehow participated with evil, and of course, it backfired. We continue to do the same today. In short, I say that we obey ourselves over God. So many times. Bottom line, sin is selfishness. It's all about me. We are products of a corrupt culture that teaches selfishness. You know, Franklin D. Roosevelt referred to selfishness as the only real atheism. Selfishness means self-centered, self-serving, and self-importance. Mary Immaculate was none of those things. Everything about Mary points us away from her and actually points us to God. We should strive to imitate her by avoiding all mere occasions of sin, and we should ask her to obtain for us the grace to avoid all deliberate sin, so that we too may provide a dwelling place for the Son of God. That might well be our prayer and desire this Advent time of waiting. For each of us is an innkeeper who decides if there is room for Jesus.